In this video, I want to introduce you to the concept of multiplying and dividing by powers of 10. And what I mean by powers of 10, right? Powers of 10. All this is going to mean is 10 with an exponent. An exponent. So, for example, we already know that, let's say, 6 times 10, well, that is going to be 60. But what happens when we have 6 times 10 squared, or 10 to the power of 2? Well, if you recall what a exponent means, this is just going to mean 10 times 10, right? 10 times 10, and 10 times 10 is just equal to 100. And then 6 times 100 is 600. So you'll notice a unique pattern when it comes to 10 with exponents. So we can see that, let's say 10 to the fourth power. 10 to the fourth power, well, this is going to equal 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. And see, this will be 100 times, and this is 100. And then 100 times 100, well, when we're multiplying by powers of 10, we just need to look at the zeros. So there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros in this number. So this will be 4 zeros after it. That will be 10,000. 10,000. So you may have noticed this pattern. When we're dealing with powers of 10, we can determine the number of zeros the power of 10 will have based on the exponent. So notice here when we had 10 squared, there's 2 zeros in this number, or 2 zeros in this number rather. And then when we had a 10 to the power of 4, we can see that there's 4 zeros. There was 4 zeros. So anytime you see a power of 10, for example, we can say 10 to the 20th power, okay? I mean, that's just going to equal 10, and then we'll just put dot, dot, dot. And this will be the first zero, and then this will be the 19th zero, and then the 20th zero. So that's all that exponents when it comes to powers of 10 mean. Now, don't get confused when using exponents with other numbers because they will not mean the same thing. Like we said earlier, exponents means multiplication repeated with the same number. But that's just so happened how the pattern ends up with 0 is that it's just going to keep adding zeros based on the exponent, right? Now let's talk about multiplication with powers of 10, okay? So multiplication with powers of 10 actually follows a very similar pattern to the pattern of 10 to the power of something. So like we said, 10 to the power of 3, or 10 cubed, this is going to have 3 zeros in it. And say we multiplied 17 by 1000, or 10 to the power of 3. All this is going to do, right? All this is going to do, and I'm going to rewrite 17 down here. 17. All this is going to do is, remember our decimal place is implied here. All this number is going to do is move our decimal places 3 places to the right. So it's going to move it 1 place here, and we can add a 0. So this is where the decimal will be. Now it's going to move it 1 place again. So put another 0 here, and then 1 place again. So the decimal is going to end up right here, and we will add another 0. So our answer to 17 times 1000, or 17 times 10 to the power of 3, is going to be 17,000. And we can do one more example just to see this. Let's say we have 10 to the power of 5 times 0.042. Okay, 0.042. And let's remember exactly what 10 to the power of 5 means. This means that there's going to be 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, or 10 with 5 zeros after it, right? So this is going to be, well, let's rewrite this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is going to be 100,000. So we see that there's 5 zeros, so we're going to have to move this decimal places 5 places to the right. So we can move it 1 place, move it 2 places, 3 places, 4 places, and now we can start adding zeros, and then 5 places. So our decimal started here, but now it's going to be right here. And then we don't need to worry about these zeros anymore because they're in front of the number. So our answer to 10 to the power of 5, or 100,000 times 0.042, is going to be 4,200 because we moved the decimal places 5 places over here. Now what I want to do real quickly is actually introduce you to a new concept when it comes to dealing with exponents. It's called, well, they're just called negative exponents, right? So we could have 2 to the power of -1. And all this means, right, all a negative exponent means is that you are going to take the reciprocal and then evaluate the exponent when the number is in the denominator. I know that sounds kind of complicated, but we can work through this. So we're going to take the reciprocal, or just flipping the numerator and denominator. That's really all that reciprocal means. It means when you multiply a number by its reciprocal, it's going to equal 1. So we could flip 2 over 1, and remember there's an implied 1 in the denominator of all numbers. So we're going to flip this into 1 over 2. And remember there was this negative 1 exponent, but when we flip it, we're going to actually swap the signs of the exponent. So this is just going to be a 1 now. And any number to the first power, to the power of 1, is just going to equal itself. So 2 to the negative 1 power is just going to equal 1/2. And we can also do, we can do 4 to the negative second power. So we have 4 to the negative second power. And remember, when dealing with negative exponents, let's just take the reciprocal. So we're going to flip the numerator denominators. So this will end up as a 1, and this will end up as a 4. But remember, we also switch the signs of the exponent when going from the normal number to the reciprocal. So this is going to be negative, sorry, it was negative 2, but now it's going to be a positive 2. And we know 14 to the power of 2 is the, or 4 to the power of 2 is the same thing as 4 times 4, and 4 times 4 is 16. So this is going to equal 1/16, 1 over 16. And now let's apply this with powers of 10 real quick. So we could say we have 10 to the negative third power. So we're going to turn this into its reciprocal. Remember, there's an implied 1 here. So this will turn into 1 over 10 to the third power, or 10 with 3 zeros, which we know is 10 to the 1000th, or sorry, 1000. So we can do this. We can say 6,000 times 10 to the negative third power, or, and we're gonna change this into this up here. So this will become, this will become 1 over 10 to the third power, 1 over 10 to the third power, or 1000, because there's 3 zeros. And remember, fractions just mean, when you're multiplying by fractions, it just means that you're multiplying by the numerator, and then dividing by the denominator. Right, so we're going to multiply 6,000 by 1, which will end up as, 6,000. And then remember, we're still dividing by the denominator, and this will end up as 1,000. And 6,000 divided by 1,000, well, that's the same thing as 6 divided by 1, which is just going to equal 6. So we can also notice a pattern when it comes to powers of 10 with negative exponents. It's the same thing as multiplying exponents, but instead of multiplying by this number, we're now going to divide by it. So it's actually just going to move the decimal in the opposite direction. So let's say we have 42 times 10 to the negative second power. Well, like we said up here, instead of now multiplying by this 10 squared, we're going to divide by 10 squared. So this is going to be the same thing. This is going to be the same thing as 42 over 10 squared. Well, that's 10 with 2 zeros, which is now 100. And when dividing by powers of 10, instead of moving the decimal place to the right, instead, we're going to move the decimal place to the left, according to how many zeros there are. So let's now move this decimal 2 places to the left, because there are 2 zeros. So the decimal is now going to be in front of this 2, which means 42 times 10 to the negative second power is going to equal 0.42. 0.42. And we can do one more example, and we will say that we have 1.45 times 10 to the negative fourth power. 10 to the negative fourth power. And remember, multiplying by a number with the negative exponent is the same thing as dividing by that number with the positive exponent. So this will turn from 10 to the negative fourth power into 1 over 10 to the fourth power. 10 to the fourth power. So we can rewrite this. We can rewrite all of this as 1.45 divided, because remember, once again, fractions mean multiplication by the numerator, division by the denominator. So we will take 10 to the fourth power. That is 10 with 4 zeros after it, which is the same thing as 10,000. And remember, when multiplying by negative exponents or dividing by positive exponents of 10 or powers of 10, we will just move the decimal place to the right, or to the left now, instead of the right. So we can do 1 here, 2, we can add a 0 here, in between the decimal shifts, 3, and then 4. So our decimal place is going to be to the left of this third 0 here from the right. And then we're going to add another 0 here to, say that there's no whole numbers. So this will be equal to 0.000145. 0.000145. And I want you to notice another pattern when it comes to multiplying by powers of 10. If you were to take 10 to the 5th power times 10 to the negative 5th power, that's going to be equal to 1, right? Because we have 10 to the 5th, 10 to the 5th times its own reciprocal, right? Times its own reciprocal. This will be 1 over 10 to the 5th power. So this is going to be 10 to the 5th on the denominator, and these values are equivalent. They are, we can see that 10 to the 5th is equal to this business, right? 100,000. So 100,000 divided by 100,000 is just going to be equal to 1, right? 100,000 divided by 100,000 is going to be equal to 1, and this will be true for any powers of 10 as long as they're the same. So I mean, we could have 10 to the negative 38th power times 10 to the 38th power, and it's going to be the same thing. This is just going to be equal to 1. This is just going to be equal to 1, and we are done.